Part 25. Shao's sweet wife, she is doted on. Author, Jin Yet. Chapter 241. Chapter 241. Was it done by humans? Still holding a kitchen knife in his hand, Yao lowered his head, paused, and said slowly, "She only likes to eat what I cook." Su Changyang. I got a mouthful of dog food for no apparent reason. While nibbling on the cucumber that had just come out of the refrigerator, he leaned on the kitchen counter and watched Yao cooking. Not to mention washing and cutting it, it's really the same thing. Seeing him busy, Su Changyang was filled with emotion. He never expected to see President Ido washing his hands and making soup in this lifetime. It is really hard to imagine. Is the magic of love so powerful? I'm afraid he will never cook for a woman in his life. I'm really getting more and more curious about you now. What kind of poison did this woman give you to make you so determined? Su Changyang tried to trick him while being careful not to step on his thunder. District. Without raising his head, Yao put the food into the pot, and with a sizzling sound, he said calmly, "People like you don't understand." Hands the spatula around, looking like he's enjoying it. Depend on. What kind of person is he? Is it okay if he doesn't have too much love experience? He said it as if he had never seen a woman before, turning his head with disdain, his eyes drifting outside the kitchen, and then, "Oh, my God." Throwing away half of the cucumber in his hand, he jumped back twice and almost jumped onto Yao to become a koala. Yao was startled by him and bumped again. Yao almost threw the pot in his hand, turned around and hit him on the head with a spatula. "You are sick. It's not a disease, it's a ghost." Pointing forward tremblingly, Yao raised his eyes and saw a man standing at the door of the kitchen. He looked dirty, with muddy water dripping from his body. Since her long hair is wet and sticking to her cheeks, looking at her like this, she really looks like a female ghost. Of course, Yao recognized this as his little wife at a glance. He was stunned for a moment, quickly put down the things in his hands, turned down the fire to a minimum, walked over and said warmly, "What's wrong?" Su Yun frowned, looking at the stranger in the house in confusion, and pointed her index finger at him. Su Changyang. Oops, if the female ghost pointed at him, would she kill him? It's so scary. Trembling. An idle man Yao said nonchalantly, "Are you okay?" "It's okay. I went to the suburbs to collect materials today. I accidentally missed something. It also rained a little, so I got wet." She pushed her hair, feeling wet and uncomfortable. "I'll go back to the room first. Take a shower and change clothes." "Well, be careful not to catch a cold." He patted her cheek with some distress. Su Yun nodded, glanced in Su Changyang's direction, and then turned and went upstairs. Seeing the female ghost disappear, Su Changyang's beating little heart calmed down a little. He stroked his heart and looked at someone who came back to continue cooking with his face as usual. His expression was calm and unchanged at all, but just now he was clearly facing female ghost is as gentle as water, and you can guess it? Could it be that the one just now is? "Didn't you see everything?" Yao said calmly, "Also, you screamed too loud just now and scared her." Staring his eyes wide, Su Changyang felt aggrieved. He was obviously frightened. Okay. After a while, Yao had prepared the meals, including salt-baked prawns, beef brisket stewed with tomatoes, pork with dried prunes and vegetables, and a soup with 3 delicacies, and there was also bird's nest and snow pear soup simmering in the pot. This food, tisk tisk, he was jealous. Has been shameless up to this point. Of course he will continue to have a meal, so as not to make this trip in vain. Like a dog-legger, he took the initiative to help put the food on the table. Then he sat down consciously, picked up the chopsticks and wanted to eat, but Yao slapped him on the back of his hand. "I told you it's not your share." "Oh, I see you've made so much, I'm afraid it's a waste if the two of you can't eat it. We're not advocating economy now, so I'll do my best to help you." As he said that, he continued to use his chopsticks. "No need," he stopped him with one hand and shooed him away like a fly. Su Changjiang's other abilities may not be the same, but he has skill in being thick-skinned. He and Si Yao played a game of chase, hide, and block, and successfully robbed a piece of meat. Just when he was about to stuff it into his mouth, I heard a very nice female voice, "My car seems to have a slight problem. Please help me take it for inspection tomorrow." "Well, then you drive my car tomorrow," Si Yao answered naturally. "No, your car is too showy. I'd better go down and take a taxi." As he said this, the person had already walked down the stairs, and his footsteps were leisurely and unhurried. Si Yao walked towards her and grabbed a big towel. "Let Su Feng take you off. It's too troublesome to take a taxi. Put a dry towel on her head, rub it gently and say, 'Don't blow dry your hair.' Drying your hair is the most troublesome thing." She grabbed a handful of her hair and turned around to see Su Changyang, who was about to eat meat, and looked in her direction. The person she called Ghost frowned. "Why haven't you left yet?" Su Changyang. Sorrow, lamentation. He was still immersed in the shock of seeing gods and beings, when he was knocked back to reality by one sentence. "I think Su Changyang has been in love for several years. Not only is he invincible, he is also loved by everyone. How come he is completely disliked when he comes to this young couple?" The first time they met, he was frightened. At the second time, he was expelled before he could even utter the words of praise. The most outrageous thing is that Si Yao turned out to be a wife slave. He didn't accuse her of being rude or treating guests at all. He actually followed her words and said, "Okay, let him go now. Listen. Listen. Is it human language? Is it something people do?" But then he heard the beautiful woman say, "Forget it, I am your friend after all, let's stay for a casual meal." Fortunately, the fairy is indeed a fairy, and she still has good intentions. However, Si Yao said, "He's not much of a friend, and if he stays, I'm afraid you won't have enough to eat." Is he such a loser again? There are so many dishes on the table, there are still them in the pot, in the kitchen, and even worse, you still have them in the refrigerator. As for being so pitiful, it's not enough to eat? If you don't have enough food, I'll buy it for you. Why don't I order takeout for you?" Su Changyang felt that he had experienced a lifetime of humiliation in such a short period of time. He looked at the little fairy with a slumped face, hoping that she could help with a word. He has discovered that Si Yao is willing to listen to anything this beauty says, which is better than anything else. I immediately put down my chopsticks and wiped my mouth. No, no, I eat very little. Besides, the ancients said that beauty is good for food. In front of such a beautiful woman, I am full even if I don't eat anything." Speaking, he blinked his peach blossom eyes at Su Yun. End of this chapter. Si Shao's sweet wife, she is doted on. Author, Jin Yet. Chapter 242. Chapter 242. Si Yao found a treasure. He thought he was charming, but he didn't expect Su Yun to look at him with an expressionless face. Then she turned to look at Si Yao and said seriously, "How about, you should let him go." Su Changyang. It was the first time that Charming suffered such a big setback. He was shocked. "No. I really don't eat much, beauty, no, 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 I can do without." "Well, Si Yao, you can't be so heartless, at least we are brothers. One game, Si Yao. Do you choose to go alone, or do you want me to call you Su Feng?" he asked, raising his eyebrows. "No, no, no. He has already been hugged by Princess Su Feng twice today. If it happens again, he will be too ashamed to see anyone without even saying anything." Looking at the two of them, an idea flashed in his mind. Beautiful sister-in-law, you see I'm here to give you a wedding gift, so it's not appropriate to drive guests out like this. Wedding gift, Soo-yoon turned to look at Si-yao, obviously very doubtful. With a slight cough, Si-yao gave her a chopstick of food. Yes, since we have decided, of course it is best to hold the wedding as soon as possible. What do you think, dear? The last word dear made Su Changjiang's skin crawl. Soo-yoon understood instantly. It seemed that the news had spread after returning from the Chu family. Their relationship would eventually be made public. However, she was also mentally prepared, and she would just make it public. What about the gift? He turned to look at Su Changyang and stretched out a hand. After being stunned for a moment, Su Changyang laughed twice and said, "Well, I came in a hurry, this. Didn't you say that you are here to give us wedding gifts?" Soo-yoon ate slowly, thinking that this person was quite interesting. Speaking of which, she has been with Si-yao for so long, and this is the first time she has met someone other than Su Feng, and it feels quite novel. Yes, yes. But I just heard that when I came here, I wasn't sure whether you were really getting married, so I didn't bring this gift with me. Before she could speak, he immediately said, "But you don't worry. I won't waste any money on this gift. I'll definitely prepare a big gift to satisfy you." He patted his chest and confirmed that he wanted to stay here for a while. Finally saw the other party's true face in Lushan, so it was a shame to leave like this. Besides, this beauty is really eye-catching. When I saw someone at the kitchen door just now, I was shocked. Now she has washed up and is wearing avocado green home clothes. She is natural and fresh. Her washed hair is naturally scattered on her shoulders, and there is still a faint fragrance. Son, when he raised his eyes and smiled softly, there was an indescribable charm. She said it was pure but a little sexy, and said it was but a little playful, but when she said she kicked him out, she was still a bit cool. Su Changyang could only say that he had never seen such a woman before, and Si-yao had found a treasure. Okay, Soo-yoon chuckled, but what kind of gift is it? Do you promise that we will be satisfied? It will definitely satisfy you, Su Changyang is still sure of this. As for women, it is nothing more than jewelry, bags, and clothes. The most important thing is to spend more money. How difficult can it be? I dare not say anything else, but he is still very good at pleasing women. What if we are not satisfied? Soo-yoon asked again after taking a sip of soup. Not satisfied? He turned to look at Si-yao, who was standing aside. He said nothing, obviously leaving all the power of speech and control in the hands of his woman. If you are not satisfied, I will give you the building in the eastern suburbs, he gritted his teeth and said fiercely. Soo-yoon thought for a while, although she didn't know what the building in the eastern suburbs looked like, and it was useless for her to get one, but even if it was a small bet, it was just for fun, and she nodded and said, "Okay." Ah. Hearing her say okay, Su Changyang breathed a sigh of relief, sat down again, and asked cautiously, "Then, can I have a meal here?" "Of course. Our family is very hospitable. We don't even want to leave a meal when a guest comes to our house," she said with a smile, looking innocent. Su Changyang. I don't know who the couple threatened to throw him out just now, and he wanted to change the words he used in his judgment. This is not a fairy, she is a witch. She is also a witch who can confuse people. After making sure that he could stay safely, Su Changyang reactivated the attribute of active gossip and gossiped while eating food. By the way, after talking for so long, I still don't know what to call a beautiful woman. Soo-yoon glanced at Si-yao and smiled slightly. "You can call me MRSSI. She's getting married anyway, so there's nothing wrong with calling her that." But she still didn't tell him her name. Su Changyang thought to himself, this woman is really a thief. However, he was not discouraged and continued to ask, "No, of course I know you are MRSSI, but, what is your surname?" Look, my surname is Su, and my name is Su Changyang. Nice to meet you. So, MRSSI, your name is. Glancing at his expectant face, Su Yun said softly, Mr. Su, it must be very impolite to inquire about someone else's wife's name in front of her husband, right? She smiled implicitly and stopped talking. Su Changyang. What feudal era? What's wrong with him just asking for a name? I wanted to continue asking, but when I caught sight of Si Yao from the corner of my eye, I swallowed the words that were on my lips and changed the subject. Then, how did you meet? He was really curious. Under his sister's strict defense, he was able to sneak in someone unexpectedly, and successfully intercepted the person. He abducted the person. So I have to say, what's yours is yours, and if it's not yours, it's useless no matter how you rob it. Su Jianran worked hard for so many years, diligently delivering snacks and gifts, picking up and dropping off students at the airport whenever he had time, and running to his company to accompany his class from time to time. In the end, Si Yao just didn't like her if he didn't like her. This. Su Yun looked at Si Yao. If it was considered acquaintance, which time should it be considered? At the earliest when she lost the game, or a few years later, did she take the initiative to seek help? We are old friends. Si Yao took over the words for her, and then looked at Su Changyang angrily, are you full? Get out of here. Su Changyang shook his head, no, I'm eating. As if to prove it, he took a few more mouthfuls of rice into his mouth. My mind was racing so fast that I didn't ask for his name or how he knew him. He would probably be beaten to death by Su Jianran when he returned home, so he still had to ask again. However, before he could speak, Su Feng walked in quickly from the outside with a serious look on his face, Mr. Si. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Si Shao's sweet wife, she is doted on. Author, Jin Yet. Chapter 243. Chapter 243 Sister-in-law's righteousness. He looked not very good looking and seemed to hesitate when speaking. Si Yao knew that the matter was not simple. He glanced at Su Yun and Su Changyang, stood up and walked a few steps outside. What? Su Feng whispered something in a low voice. Si Yao's expression changed and he subconsciously glanced in Su Yun's direction. Although he just glanced at her and said nothing, Su Yun's heart trembled inexplicably. I know, he nodded and walked back. Su Feng still stood there as if waiting. Standing in front of the dining table, Su Yun looked up at him, while the heartless Su Changyang was still feasting. I didn't expect that Si Yao was really good at cooking. He was no better than a 5-star. The chef was bad, his mouth was full of oil when he ate, and he didn't care about what they were saying. His eyes stopped on him. Si Yao looked at Su Yun and said in a very serious tone, there was a fire on Tongan Road just now. Yes, Su Yun nodded, waiting for his next words. Before he could speak, an idea flashed in her mind, and she suddenly thought, Tongan Road. This place name sounds familiar. Isn't that where Arian lives now? Because I sent her there twice, and it was quite close to the company. I remembered this place. Si Yao nodded, indicating that she remembered correctly. Su Yun suddenly looked shocked and stood up, Na Arian. The fire in the whole building is not small. Most people have been sent to the hospital. The details are not clear yet. Su Feng also just received the news and came to report it immediately. I want to take a look, Su Yun said anxiously. She was about to rush out, but was stopped by Si Yao. There are firefighters, police, and ambulances over there now. They are all more professional than you. You can't help much if you go there now. You are just anxious and may even cause chaos to the scene. Don't panic. I have asked Su Feng find out the news, and as soon as you find her, the news will come to you. His words are very reasonable, but how could Soo-yoon not be anxious? To be honest, in the past few years of Willan's life, Arian was her only best friend. He would fight for her, stay up late with her, help her beat up scumbags, and always think about her. In her heart, Arian is not only a friend, but also a sister. Now that I heard that something might have happened to her, how could I not be anxious? But Yao's words gave her a reminder. She lowered her head and looked at the home clothes she was wearing. It was indeed inappropriate to rush over like this, so she nodded calmly, "Okay, I'll go change clothes and come back soon." "Wait a minute, there is news about my son. No matter what she is like, no matter how she is, we will go and take a look." Although she tried her best to calm down, her voice was still slightly trembling. After all, she was still afraid that the news would be bad. "Don't worry, I'll accompany you." He shook her hand and gave her strength. Soo-yoon turned around and went upstairs. Yao looked at her back and sighed quietly. He turned around and saw Su Changyang with a dull look on his face. He finally stopped eating and opened his mouth slightly to look. Looking at him with a confused look on his face. Seeing Yao looking at him, Su Changyang put down the spoon in his hand. Is the building on fire? You just mentioned the old building on Tongan Road." "Yes. It's too old over there, and the wires are aging. Although the location is good, it's in disrepair. The municipal administration is going to be renovated, so a fire is normal." "But..." Su Changyang was somewhat familiar with that area, but just looking at it, it was unusual for them to look so nervous. "But I see that my sister-in-law is quite nervous. Could it be that some relative lives there?" This beauty refused to give her name, and she didn't know where she came from. Could she really be Cinderella from a small family, so it wouldn't be unusual to have relatives living there? Wow, the people living in that place are either very poor original residents, or outsiders who rent there. The key is, the outsiders who are not in good conditions are just looking for cheap. If her relatives live there, their family background is not very good. "No." Yao shook his head, "It's a colleague." "Colleague?" Su Chanjun was shocked. He never expected this answer, but she just. Looking at her restrained panic and nervousness just now, it was as if something happened to a relative of hers, but it turned out to be a colleague. Are the relationships between colleagues so good now? They have a deep affection and a good relationship. Knowing what he was thinking, Yao could only explain to him this way. Su Changyang gave a thumbs up. "Sister-in-law, you are loyal." Yao rolled his eyes at him, and said seriously, "I really can't keep you now, and Su Feng can't send you off either. You go to the yard and drive one back first." Throughout the whole night, what he said now was already the most beautiful and most eloquent sentence to Su Changyang. "Come on. I still have this." Nodding, he stood up and walked over. When he passed by Yao, he stopped again and looked at him sideways. "But there is something I still want to do. Just to ask." "What?" Yao's eyebrows moved and he looked at him sideways. Su Changyang glanced in the direction of the stairs behind him, but did not see the little fairy. He turned his head again and said, "Sister-in-law, what is your last name?" Without waiting for him to get angry, he quickly added, "You don't want me to see her in the future, even if she is a beauty or a little fairy, right? It's okay for me to shout like that, but you can't say that I molested my sister-in-law. I really like this." Having said that, it is indeed no secret, and soon their wedding invitation will be printed on the headlines of every page. Yao moved his lips and said, "My surname is Su." "Oh," with an okay gesture, Su Changyang left with satisfaction. "I picked a car from the yard and drove away. After feeling my full belly, I felt that my trip today was not in vain. I also saw people, asked about their last names, and even had a meal cooked by CEO Sida Food. This world is worth it." Looking back now, All those things like climbing over walls, being electrocuted, and owing favors are nothing. Only. Su Changyang frowned and searched in his mind for all the people with the surnames so that he might know, but there seemed to be none in his mind. Could it be that he was really from an ordinary background? Su Yun changed into light clothes and went downstairs. Unsurprisingly, Su Changyang had already left. Under such circumstances, it was strange that he stayed. How's it going? Now she only cares about Arian's situation. The rescue is almost complete, and all the injured have been sent to the hospital because the situation is chaotic and complicated. The identities of everyone have not yet been completely determined. We can go to the hospital now to have a look. These words were exactly what she wanted, and she said without hesitation, then let's go. End of this chapter. Shao's sweet wife, she is doted on. Author, Jin Yet. Chapter 244. Chapter 244. Su Yun fainted. Because the fire broke out in the entire building and it was at night, many people had already fallen asleep, so there were many injured people. The municipal people's hospital suddenly became busy and noisy with people coming and going. Wails and shouts were mixed together, and the hospital hall was in chaos. Su Yun quickly shuttled among them. Si Yao stayed by her side, and Su Feng opened the way for them, but they found Yan quickly. Her injuries were not serious, there were slight burns on her arms and one side of her cheek, and her knees and ankles were bruised when she ran out, but compared to others, they were already pretty good. However, there is nothing wrong with her, but her mother's situation is very bad. She has been pushed into the operating room and is still being rescued. She is guarding the door of the operating room with tears on her face. Arian, Su Yun saw her at a glance from far away and walked over quickly. Sister Yun, Sister Yun. Seeing her, it was like seeing a life-saving straw. Arian ran over and said, "My mother. It's okay, it will be okay," Su Yun comforted her softly after hearing about the situation. In fact, she was not sure what the situation was inside. Looking up and down, he made sure that her injury was not too serious, and breathed a sigh of relief. "I hope you're fine. I believe Auntie will be fine too. My mother was trying to protect me. She woke up first. She came to call me, but the fire was too strong. She was hit by the wood because she was trying to protect me. It was all me, all me." While thinking about it, she was a little incoherent, which showed that she was greatly stimulated. Su Yun gently held her shoulders, and could understand the pain and sadness in her heart at this moment. The operation was still in progress, and Si Yao did not persuade her to go back and rest first. He asked Su Feng to buy some snacks and hot drinks, but she was not in the mood to eat or drink at the moment, and the whole atmosphere was heavy. Compared with the operations being performed here, there are still people with minor injuries being bandaged outside, some with broken arms and legs, and some who cannot be saved. There is a lot of crying. It is really miserable. Su Yun was far away. Looking at the miserable situation over there, she really couldn't bear it. After a while, the lights in the operating room went out, and the doctor came out and took off his mask. Arian immediately rushed over. "Doctor, is my mother okay? Was the operation a success?" Glancing at her lightly, the doctor sighed and shook his head. "I'm sorry, No, it won't." Before he could finish his words, he was interrupted by Wu Arian. She shook her head and stepped back. "No way, my mother will be fine, she will be fine. She had a ruptured spleen and was bleeding too much. I'm sorry, but we have tried our best." After saying these words, the hospital bed inside had been rolled out, and the person lying on it was covered with a layer of white cloth. At this time, Arian had stopped talking, looking at the bed with a blank expression, reluctant to step forward. Si Yao noticed that Su Yun's face was also very pale. Her eyes were fixed on the bed and the white cloth, and her hands were even trembling slightly. "No, no. Take 2 steps back and stop, as if to prove that she was wrong. She stepped forward again and reached out to lift up the white cloth. However, the outstretched hand was shaking so much that her fingertips could not even hold the piece of cloth. However, Su Feng stepped forward and lifted off the white cloth for her, revealing a blood-stained and haggard face. Wow! At that moment, Arian burst into tears. Mom! Su Yun felt like she had a splitting headache. It was as if her cry brought out something deeply hidden deep in her heart. There seemed to be a raging tide pouring out of her mind, but she couldn't bear it. Her headache seemed to explode. What was in front of her I couldn't see clearly and felt dizzy. Su Yun. Keeping an eye on her reaction, but seeing something was wrong with her, Yao hugged her sliding body and called her name. Over there, Arian was crying bitterly and didn't pay attention to anything else, but Su Yun had already passed out. Su Feng, take care of Miss Wu, he ordered calmly. Su Feng nodded and watched Arian silently. He gently put his hands on her shoulders and supported her gently. Yao picked up Su Yun and went directly to the doctor. Doctor, nurse, someone has fainted. You will hurt your parents. It was you who killed them. Why are you still alive, but they are dead, because you killed them? Dad, Mom, don't go, don't go. Dad, Mom. Many voices lingered in her ears, as if someone was talking to her, but it seemed that they were not talking to her. There were countless double images in front of her, but she couldn't see clearly who those people were. There were loud noises, fires, debris, and faces. Everything seemed so close and yet so far away. Dad, Mom, don't go, don't go. Ah dash. With a sudden exclamation, Su Yun suddenly opened her eyes, and what she saw was the white ceiling. The whiteness diluted the blood-red horror in the dream. She was panting heavily, and her face was covered with sweat. Are you awake? A familiar voice was very close to her. Su Yun turned her head and saw Yao's worried face. Are you having a nightmare? Seeing him, her heart felt much more at ease. She nodded, feeling her throat was extremely dry. Water. Yao immediately brought the water he had prepared to her. Like a traveler who had been thirsty for many days in the desert, she drank the water greedily. Soon, the glass of water had reached the bottom. Do you want more? He asked. Su Yun shook her head and lay down weakly. The scene in the dream was still there, but there were many things that she couldn't seem to remember. She vaguely felt that the things in the dream should have happened to her, but she didn't know why, she just couldn't remember. To be precise, if it weren't for the sudden fainting today, I would have no memory at all. The doctor said you just fainted due to stimulation, and you'll be fine when you wake up. Yao gently stroked her forehead and said softly, do you feel any discomfort? No, she shook her head, thinking of his words. By the way, how is Arian? She's fine, Su Feng is with her. Her mother has been pushed to the morgue for placement, and we will wait for the funeral arrangements later, he said briefly, but he also comforted her, at least someone was accompanying her. I'm really. She sighed, and she was speechless to herself. She was obviously here to comfort Arian, but she fainted first. What's the matter? You don't want to, I can't blame you for this, and Wu Arian understands it. Don't think too much now, take good care of yourself and have a good rest. He pulled up the quilt. Let's stay here for the rest of the day, observe it, and then leave the hospital tomorrow if everything is fine. End of this chapter. Shao's sweet wife, she is doted on. Author, Jin Yet. Chapter 245. Chapter 245 has nothing to do with me. I didn't argue with him. It was indeed a wise choice to rest here at such a late hour. It's just that she didn't dare to close her eyes, for fear that once she closed her eyes, those terrible sounds and images in her dream would appear again, so she held Yao's hand to prevent him from leaving. Please talk to me for a while. What did you say? he sat down on the edge of the bed and looked at her tenderly. Anything you say is fine. Or, tell me about yourself, she thought for a while. She had never asked him about himself for so long. She only knew that the Si family was also a big family, but the two of them were so different together. She has never seen it for a long time. Myself, he laughed, it's lackluster. Gee, using this word is really too modest. His Si Yao's life can be written into a legendary novel, but it is actually lackluster. If he is lackluster, what kind of life do others have? Plain water? Then tell me about your family. After adjusting to a more comfortable position, she asked, you have never told me about your family. Who else is there in your family? We have to meet you when we have a wedding. Family. You will see me, but it doesn't matter. They are all insignificant people. What is important is that you are with me. His voice was still gentle, but his eyes were much deeper. His words sounded fine, but Su-Yun always felt that something was wrong. No matter what they called, they were insignificant people. They were all his family members. As if he guessed what she was thinking, Si Yao curled his lips. Do you think those are my family members? Yeah, she nodded, didn't she? In terms of blood relationship, yes. But would you call the people who have sent various assassins to assassinate you and used various means to frame you since you were a child as your family? His tone did not even rise or fall at all. But Su-Yun could hear the coldness. Those words were like knives tempered with ice. They made no sound when they penetrated the skin and flesh, but they were cold to the bones. When the chill spread, the pain was heartbreaking. God, what did he experience when he was a child? Everyone says that this new generation of the Si family leader is cruel and ruthless in his actions, but who knows that he is still burdened with these things? If this is really the case, how did he survive? Don't look at me like this. I'm actually not as powerful as you think. He reached out and scratched the bridge of her nose, and he chuckled, it's just that in this environment, you have to get used to some things. Learn to survive, the Si family is instinctive. After a pause, he added, but you don't have to be afraid. Now that I'm the head of the family, no one dares to do anything to you. Besides, we don't live in C's house, so it's okay. Yeah, Su-Yun nodded vigorously, took his hand and put it on the side of his face. As long as you are here, I'm not afraid. That wholehearted trust warmed Si Yao's heart. She is so lovely, like an obedient kitten, cute and well-behaved, and she trusts him so much that she is neither afraid of him nor clinging to him. She is so precious. This is his precious treasure, and he is willing to protect her with all his heart. Go to sleep, his fingers tickled her cheeks. She smiled and curled up her neck to hide. After a while, her eyelids trembled and she fell asleep again. Looking at her sleeping face, the smile on Si Yao's face gradually faded, and the expression in his eyes was complicated. Although her speech was unclear in her sleep, she could vaguely hear her calling her parents, which showed that she was dreaming about her parents. If she remembers correctly, her parents died in a plane crash when she was young, but she was still young at that time and was not on the plane at the time, so she shouldn't remember them. Could it be that she missed them too much? However, when she returned to Chu's house before, she seemed to have never seen her missing her parents so strongly. Today she suddenly fainted. Is it because of the scene where Wu Arian's mother was pushed out? Her heart is still fragile. Here, something happened. The man gasped and hid in the messy room on the phone. The house was extremely messy, and the lights were not turned on. Only the moonlight outside the house shone coldly, casting silver frost on the ground. Why are you panicking? Didn't you say, I'll take care of you? The other party used a voice changer, and his voice sounded hoarse and strange, but the impatience was still obvious. But I didn't expect that the fire would be so big, and there were so many people in that broken building. Even if he was hiding in the darkest corner, his hands and feet could not control his trembling. He really didn't expect that there would be so many people. People. I thought there weren't many residents in that dilapidated building, especially at night, when the lights were dark and I didn't even see a few people with lights on. How could it be, how could there be so many people? When he saw a person being carried out, and when he hid in the crowd and listened to the wailing and crying, his heart almost broke. Idiot, the other side scolded, I asked you to light a small fire to scare people. If you make such a big fuss, do you still want to live? You asked me to set the fire. I am an accomplice at most, he said in a trembling voice, trying to stay calm. Yes, at most he was instructed by others, but he was definitely not the mastermind, so even if the police found him, they couldn't blame him. A burst of sneer came, and the voice on the phone was sinister. Really? Do you have any evidence? Don't tell me, these phone calls are evidence. Do you think the police will believe you? You and I have never met each other. This sentence made the man look ashen. Yes, they had only been in contact online and by phone, and these could be faked. He thought that a small thing was very simple, just like when he stole something, robbed something, or made some small noise. It was no different. I thought, this time it was a big deal. Don't panic, the voice on the phone was like the voice of hell, chuckling. Let me ask you, were you seen by anyone when you set the fire? Licking his dry lips vigorously, the man thought hard and shook his head. Yes, probably not. Don't do it, be sure. It's an old community over there, and there's no surveillance. As long as no one sees you, you won't be discovered. It's common for wires to age and fall into disrepair. This may not necessarily happen. Check it on your head. These few words were light and easy, but they made the man feel reassured. After thinking about it carefully, he felt that it made sense. Yes. It's just that the wires are aging. It has nothing to do with me, it doesn't matter. That's right, the other person smiled, but during this period of time, you'd better not stay in the city and go somewhere else to hide. I'll put a note on your card. The money will last you a while. Remember, this phone number will not be used again, don't contact me. But before he could finish his words, he was hung up on. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Shao's sweet wife, she is doted on. Author, Jin Yet. Chapter 246. Chapter 246. It doesn't matter, just send it. Wu Arian took some time off because she was injured, had to take care of her mother's funeral, and was in a particularly bad mood. This fire caused a sensation throughout Sioux City. Although it was a dilapidated old building, there were still some indigenous people there. Because of this fire, 7 people died, 9 were seriously injured, and 23 were slightly injured. It is considered quite serious and has attracted the attention of city leaders. In addition to condolences to the injured, they also strictly investigated the cause of the fire. However, the alley there was narrow and there was no surveillance. In addition, it was already very late and most people had fallen asleep, so no one knew exactly how it started. Anyway, when it was discovered, the fire was already very big. It was tentatively speculated that it was due to the aging of the wires, which subsequently aroused considerable public indignation. They believed that this was a dereliction of duty on the part of the superiors, who failed to carry out reasonable renovation and maintenance of these old buildings, which led to such an accident. Immediately afterwards, a series of butterfly effects were triggered, with investigations and accountability from top to bottom, and the maintenance and construction of other old communities. The recent TV news was basically about this fire. Maybe it was because she witnessed the fire that day and felt very uncomfortable. Soo-yoon could hardly watch the news about this difficult incident. She turned off the TV and raised her head and sighed. Arian is on vacation and she hasn't been to the laboratory for 3 full days. In fact, she had no inspiration or ideas, and her mind went blank. She knew that she should not be influenced by her emotions, and she also had to make progress on the Marseille soap, but she still couldn't control herself. The company will send people to express condolences about Wu Arian's mother's funeral, and they will also express their condolences accordingly. Sci Yao simply moved his work to his home in the past 2 days and stayed with her all day long. She was discharged from the hospital that day. Although the doctor clearly said that there was nothing wrong with her and she just needed to rest, he was still worried. His concern is not expressed in words, but in practical actions. Anyway, now that we have computers and mobile phones, there is nothing wrong with remote operations. However, some meetings have to be postponed accordingly. She nodded and said, Su Feng is still with her. Su Feng has not been seen in the past 2 days. Sci Yao said that he sent him to take care of Yan, which is good. Arian originally lived with her mother. Now that her mother has passed away, she is alone. If no one is with her, she is really afraid that she will have random thoughts. Although Su Feng doesn't talk much, he just has something to say at this time. It was just right that there were not many people accompanying her. On the one hand, he has enough ability to take good care of her, but on the other hand, he will not talk too much, which will only make her more troubled. Yes, Sci Yao nodded, the building she rented burned down. I asked Su Feng to take her to live in a small apartment under my name first. Thank you, no matter what, this thank you is still needed. He really did a lot for her. You're talking silly again. He pushed her messy hair aside and asked softly, what do you want to eat today? Shaked her head, she had no appetite at all. After what happened, she really had no appetite. If you have a bad appetite, eat something sour to whet your appetite. If you're in a bad mood, eat something sweet to stimulate dopamine secretion. He paused, hawthorn, snow pear and white fungus soup. Looking into his eyes, Suyun smiled helplessly. Just as she was about to speak, she heard him say again, don't say no. Who said no? I want to say it, but it sounds like I want to eat it. He was so considerate, how could she refuse his kindness? Sci Yao smiled with satisfaction, leaned forward and kissed her on the cheek. Wait for me. He got up and went to the kitchen. His cell phone rang. He picked it up and glanced at his assistant, then picked up, hello. Mr. Secretary, a reporter took a photo of you at the Municipal People's Hospital that day, the assistant said quickly. Well, I went and took the photo. He was stunned and said disapprovingly. Anyway, paparazzi are everywhere, and reporters are also alert to the news. However, he believes that he was not there to photograph him that day. He was mainly there to report on the fire, and it was just a coincidence that he was photographed. But, hearing the assistant's hesitation, he frowned and said, if you have something to say, just say it. What a hesitation. But the reporter photographed you with a woman, and you also seemed to be having intimate actions. Although there was some hesitation, he still finished the sentence in one breath. After all, his boss has never had any scandals or gossip. He was also very surprised when this kind of news broke. But the editors-in-chief of several magazines and some self-media are still very sensible and did not send the photos out. They are asking you what you mean. Joke. Although the photo was taken, you still have to ask him whether it can be sent out. Otherwise, if the big boss is not happy, it is hard to say whether their small magazine will still exist tomorrow. This was a routine matter. He pondered for a moment and turned to look outside the kitchen. In the living room, Suyun was sitting on the sofa with one hand on the back of the sofa. Her head was tilted to one side, and her long hair poured down like a waterfall. Normally, she is wearing pink and fluffy home clothes, and she looks extremely cute just from the back. It doesn't matter, just do it. He retracted his gentle gaze and said lightly. President, The assistant was shocked. I thought he would take down the photos and delete them all, but I didn't expect that he didn't care and even said just post them. What an unprecedented thing this is. His boss is in love. That's it. When he was about to hang up the phone, he remembered something again. By the way, send me a copy of the photo later. After such a long time, there are almost no photos of him and Soo-yoon, so it would be nice to have one like this. And after the relationship is fully disclosed, he can openly use a photo of the two of them as the background image on his mobile phone. Feel good. Wash your hands and start making delicious desserts for his little wife. However, what he didn't know was that the photos taken by the reporter were not what he thought. The scene was chaotic that day, and they were at the door of the operating room inside, and there were bodyguards blocking them outside, so the angle of the candid shot was always a little off. It's just that sometimes this deviation is not a big problem, and sometimes, it is a huge difference. It is also because of this that it caused subsequent misunderstandings. Of course, Sci-Yao didn't know this at this time. He thought they were some photos of himself and Soo-yoon together, so just post them. They had to be made public anyway, but he didn't expect that the heroine in the photos was the wrong one. People. End of this chapter. S.I. Shao's sweet wife, she is doted on. Author, Jin Yet. Chapter 247. Chapter 247. Girl, forget it. Although the fire attracted the attention of many people, not all people paid attention to it. Su Changyang now regrets extremely why he was so thirsty that day and insisted on craving for that durian mill layer and milk tea. Even if he spit it out now, it would be too late. No matter whether he arrived at the company or went home, Su Jianran would pester him and insist on asking for the result. Originally, he wanted to hide for 2 days. After all, he didn't dare to tell the truth, for fear that his sister's psychological endurance would not be acceptable to her. However, when he went to the men's room and Su Jianran rushed in and blocked the door, he knew that he couldn't escape. Sister, this is the men's restroom. You seem to have entered the wrong restroom, he pointed at the big men's restroom sign above his head and said with a dry laugh. Su Jianran looked at him and sneered, wrong entry? As long as you, Su Changyang, do not make a mistake, I will not make a mistake. How are you talking? How can you call your brother by his name like that? He pretended to be calm and scolded him like an elder brother, and turned to wash his hands at the sink. You still know that you are my brother? Do you think you are such a brother? What's the point of avoiding me every day because of what you promised me? Su Jianran was furious. She heard that he had already looked for Sci-Yao, so she looked for him everywhere every day, but he was no longer in the company, hadn't gone home, and went to the bar again. When she arrived at the bar, he had just left, and he was clearly hiding on purpose. The more he hid like this, the worse Su Jianran felt in his heart, and the sense of crisis became more and more serious. Hide. Why should I hide from you? I haven't, Su Changyang pretended. He waved his hand, and the water on his hand splashed everywhere. Su Jianran narrowed his eyes subconsciously. He immediately wanted to run, but she grabbed the tie faster and tightened it. You run. I didn't run away, he quickly defended, I just wanted to get you some paper to wipe the water off. Don't bother me, I'll get it myself. She turned around and strode towards Su Changjiang's office. However, the tie on her hand did not loosen, and she dragged Su Changyang back to the office like this. His neck was tightened, and he could only follow her, but he couldn't do anything to his sister. Su Changjiang's face turned red, and he was watched and saluted by employees all the way. Sister, please let go and say something. Brother is out of breath. Su Yuruan. Being completely ignored, coupled with the various looks from around him, Su Changyang finally couldn't bear it and got angry, calling her by her name. Su Jianran just stopped and turned around to look at him. angry. Su Changyang, who finally took a breath, grabbed his tie from her hand, loosened it hard so that he could breathe, and stared at her angrily. You want the answer, right? Okay. I tell you. Come with me. After saying that, he strode into his office. Come on, standing at the door, staring at Su Yuran. Su Zhenran was shocked for 2 seconds before coming back to his senses, and shouted unwillingly, come on, who is afraid of whom? She followed her in. Su Changyang slammed the door, opened it again within 2 seconds, and shouted at the stunned employees outside, you don't even want to do it? Life is so leisurely, how about we all work overtime tonight? No one dared to eat melon anymore, they all lowered their heads or were busy working, or pretending to be busy working. Bang, the office door was slammed shut again, and everyone outside shrank. The president was in a bad mood today, so don't get into trouble. Su Changyang was in a bad mood. He was being led like a dog for a walk in front of many employees, and he lost all dignity. It was his sister who couldn't be scolded or hit, and he was suffocating. Since it's already like this, there's no point in hiding, so I'll just finish talking to her. Yes, I went to see Sci-Yao. He lit a cigarette and said bluntly, not only did I meet him, I also met his fiancée. After careful consideration of the words, he decided to use the official title. Su Zhenran's fingers clenched tightly and her fists were tightly clenched, but she still controlled herself. You mean that vixen? She gritted her teeth and word after word came out from between her teeth. Su Changyang had no doubt that if Miss Su were standing here at this moment, she would be torn apart by Zhenran's hands. Don't say that, people are also in love with each other, he subconsciously helped Su Yun. With such beauty and temperament, it is too superficial to describe her as a vixen. At least he must be a fox fairy. Yes, at least he is a fox fairy. What kind of two people are in love? She is clearly a vixen. She hooked up with my person while I was not paying attention, Su Zhenran said bitterly. Tell me quickly, what is her name, what does she look like, where is she from, and what does she do? Yeah, when did she hook up with Sci-Yao? He took a long puff of cigarette and blew out a smoke ring. Su Changyang said faintly, sister, forget it. Looking at him with wide eyes, Su Zhenran seemed to have heard a big joke. What did you say? I'm serious. Chi Ran, think about what you just said. Do you believe it? What do you mean by someone who hooks up with you? When did Sci-Yao become your person? From beginning to end, I have always only regarded you as a girl. You know it very well in your heart, but you just refuse to admit it. Su Changyang rarely spoke so seriously and reasoned with her, it doesn't matter who that woman is. If I like you, I have already liked you, and I won't wait until another woman shows up. What Su Changyang said was the truth, but it was the truth that Su Zhenran couldn't accept. Over the years, she has been rejected countless times, and she can't remember how many times she has been given the cold shoulder, but she has never given up. She has always believed that they will be together sooner or later. Except for herself, no one is suitable for him, and no one is worthy of him. Gotta get him. So now, she doesn't want to listen to a word Su Changyang says. Covering her ears with her hands, she stomped her feet irritably. Su Changyang, are you crazy? I am your sister, and you are telling me this. I am your biological sister, and instead of helping me, you are helping someone outsider? Tell me, did that woman do you any good? Or did she confuse you? You still say she is not a vixen? A vixen can confuse people like this. She will confuse you too, and she will not even help her own sister, but will help an outsider. The more she talked, the more she felt that this was the case. That must be a vixen who is used to seducing men, just like in the movie she filmed. She wants to be a royal palace and tear these shameless vixens apart. End of this chapter. Si Shao's sweet wife, she is doted on. Author, Jin Yet. Chapter 248. Chapter 248 I only want one man in this world. Frowning, Su Changyang said impatiently, Su Jinran, are you crazy? I am your brother, your biological brother, what are you talking about? Bah! You're not my brother. Su Jinran was so angry that he opened his mouth to curse. If you were my brother, you wouldn't say these words. If you were my brother, you should tell me what the is that little about. Who is she? Who is she? Is she the little vixen from the Gu family? She began to make random guesses, and she only guessed at some girls around her who could be thought of, around the same age, from wealthy families. Thinking about it, most of them are business marriages, but she thinks that the Su family is not bad at all. Of course, it cannot compare with a family like the Si family, but compared to others, her conditions are good enough. She is beautiful, has won the Best Actress award, and has known Si Yao for so many years. Why can't it be her? It can only be her. Stop guessing, I'm sure you don't know me. Because, I actually don't know him either. Not wanting her to think wildly, Su Changyang said, she's not the daughter of a noble family. I guess her net worth is quite ordinary. Anyway, I haven't seen her before. Also, Si Yao really loves her. I advise you not to have any thoughts about her, otherwise, if you him off, I won't be able to protect you. What he said was serious. Si Yao also reminded him not to touch his bottom line. There are rumors outside that Si Yao is vicious and cruel. In fact, he just looks cold and hard to approach. But after knowing each other for so many years, Su Changyang knows very well that he is just not easy to get along with on the surface, but he is still very friendly. Easygoing. Otherwise, we would not tolerate Su Jinran's harassment again and again, nor would we tolerate his talkativeness. But one thing is that people have their own bottom line. Never touch places that you shouldn't touch. Otherwise, no matter how easy it is to get along with people, they will become ruthless. Su Changyang was serious, but Su Jinran couldn't hear a word he said. All she wants to think about now is to find out the woman who robbed Si Yao, and nothing else. You don't have to worry about whether I recognize him or not, just tell me who it is. By the way, do you have a photo? She asked. Shaked his head, Su Changyang was deeply afraid that she wouldn't believe it. Do you think Si Yao might let me take her photo? Su Jinran thought about it, but still felt unwilling to do so. Then, you should know what she does, right? How much information do you really think I can find out? It took a lot of effort for me to see him. I'm not going to lie to you, your brother and I almost risked my life there. It's really good for you. Zhiran, your conditions are so good, it's not difficult to find a good man. Why do you have to hang yourself on a tree? Look at me, your brother. Look at how you hang one on each tree, which one counts, she said with a cold face. Su Changyang. That's not what I said. I really do it for your own good. He casually put the cigarette in the ashtray and straightened up. Yiran, I will introduce you to some good men from our circle another day. Look for a few, and if you don't like them, I'll let the whole country, or even the whole world, find them for you, and I'll definitely satisfy you. Su Jinran glanced at him coldly and turned around. I only want one man in this world, and that man's name is Si Yao. Seeing her walk out of the office without even looking back, Su Changyang felt helpless. There is such a stubborn girl, there is nothing he can do about it. Su Jinran was in a particularly bad mood after leaving Su Changyang. Although he was mentally prepared, the feeling was different after receiving the exact news from his brother. Si Yao, there really is another woman. Not only that, he also wants to be engaged, he wants to be engaged to someone else. How can this be possible? How can this be done? After thinking about it day and night for so many years, Su Jinran couldn't accept it at all, but he wanted to marry someone else. He felt like the sky was falling apart. She was confused, driving alone and crying, and unknowingly came to the gate of Yun's house. Of course, she did not drive to Haikan, but the Yun family also had two properties in Su City. First snow. Sitting in the car, she called Yun Chugzyo, looking at the door and crying. Yun Chugzyo was startled when she heard her crying on the phone. Hiran, what's wrong with you? Don't cry. Please speak slowly, explain. Chu Shui, woo woo woo, are you at home? At this moment, she remembered to ask Yun Chugzyo if she was at home, so she ran over directly. Here, there, I'm here, do you want to come over? Woo, I'm already at the door of your house, come and open the door, okay. Su Jinran was crying so hard that he was out of breath, and he felt extremely aggrieved. Ah! Are you at my door? Just wait, before hanging up the phone, I heard Yun Chugzyo's footsteps. After a while, I saw the door open, revealing a head. Yun Chugzyo looked around, then saw the car parked in front of the gate, and hurriedly walked over. Yi ran. Whoa! Turning his head to look at her, Su Jinran just shed tears. Why are you alone? Come on, come in with me. If you have anything to say, speak slowly. Hurry over and ask someone to open the door and let her drive the car in. When Su Jinran got out of the car, he immediately hugged her neck. Chu Shui, what should I do, what should I do? Don't worry, let's go in first. Yun Chugzyo coaxed her softly and took her into the house. As soon as you enter the house, the warm smell inside hits your face, and there is a faint smell of incense in the air, which actually relieves people's tense mood. Maybe it was because he met his friends, or maybe he was away for a while, that he vented his emotions a lot. After entering the house, Su Jinran's mood improved a lot, and he no longer just cried, but became silent and quiet. Sitting on the soft sofa, he ordered his servants to make a pot of fruit tea and brought some snacks over. He waved his hand to signal them all to leave. Then he took Su Jinran's hand and said, "Come on, can you tell me now what's going on?" Lifting his eyelids to look at her, Su Jinran blinked, and the tears in his eyes rolled down again. Sighing, she took out a tissue and wiped her tears. Yun Chugzyo said, "Oh, it hurts me so much. My little princess, who is so cruel and dares to make you angry? Let me guess. The person who can make you so sad must be, Si." She dragged out the last word, but deliberately did not say the last word. Su Jinran looked at her with wide eyes, and tears fell again as he listened to her words. There was no sound this time, but tears kept falling. End of this chapter. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Shao's sweet wife, she is doted on. Author, Jin Yet. Chapter 249. Chapter 249 can only be called dog licking. Yun Chugzyo neither coaxed her nor comforted her. After she cried for a while and her tears gradually stopped, she said, "Can we talk now?" She sniffed and wiped it with the tissue handed over by her friend. She said with tears in her eyes, "You know, he is getting engaged, but I don't even know who that woman is yet." "Hey, that's it," Yun Chugzyo disagreed very much. "I thought it was a big deal. Isn't it just an engagement? It's not a marriage. Besides, even if you are married, the divorce rate is not low these days. What are you doing?" From the time she knew Si Yao might be engaged to when she was sure he was actually engaged, no one had ever said such a thing to her. Her parents were too cautious to mention it, and Su Changyang bluntly told her to give up, but Yun Chugzyo told her that it was nothing. For a moment, she was stunned. But, can it still be like this? Why not? He bent down and took 2 cups of fruit tea, handed her 1 cup, and held the cup to warm his hands. "You ran, I'm not telling you. Look in the mirror and see what your conditions are. Don't you know how good you are? How many fans, how many movie fans are you, how many people are crazy about you? Are you so unsure of yourself? I have always admired you, and I think you dare to love, hate, and pursue yourself. I like something, but I didn't expect it." Sighed, she shook her head. I, I'm pursuing him." When Yoon Chug-seo said this, Soo Jin-ran also felt ashamed, and he said with a blush, "I have been chasing him for so many years. It's not like you haven't seen it, but he is lukewarm to me. What can I do?" She felt that she had worked very hard. If it were anyone else, she might have given up long ago, but she didn't. She kept persisting. She believed that her persistence could move him, or at least God, and would give her a good ending. But, oh, you thought, but this is the result. Do you call that pursuit? After glancing at her, Yoon Chug-seo still shook her head in disapproval. "No, aren't you shouting?" Soo Jin-ran himself was a little confused after what she said. She raised the corners of her lips and smiled faintly, with a hint of ridicule in that smile. Yoon Chug-seo raised her eyes and looked at her, but the words she said with her red lips were a bit hurtful. 11 Ran, with all due respect, what you did before those things, that's not called pursuit, it can only be called dog licking." Soo Jin-ran fell out at that moment and placed the cup heavily on the coffee table with a crisp sound. She stood up suddenly, but her legs were numb from crossing her legs for a long time. She couldn't stand up for a moment, and her legs fell back onto Yoon Chug-seo's body. The tea inside spilled out and wet their clothes. "Yoon Chug-seo, I regard you as a friend. If you hurt me like this, I will be angry." Since she didn't stand up, her momentum became weaker. She was still angry, but her tone was not as angry. The clothes on her body were wet. Yoon Chug-seo glanced down, frowned, put down the cup and wiped the wet area in front of her. "Just be angry when you're angry. You don't want to hear the truth anyway, so forget it if you don't like it. I will not say any more." Standing up, she turned and walked towards the stairs. Seeing that she was about to leave, Soo Jin-ran became anxious again because she was no longer caring about him. The reason why she came to Yoon Chug-seo was because she was the only one who understood her and wanted to come to her to seek some comfort. If she ignored her, who would be willing to listen to her complaints and give her some advice? Woolen cloth. Chu shui, don't go. I didn't mean that. Don't be angry. I'm not angry yet. Why are you getting angry? He chased after her and grabbed her wrist to prevent her from leaving. Then are you still angry? After standing still, Yoon Chug-seo turned to look at her. Hunting his mouth, Soo Jin-ran still maintained his last line, "Then if you don't say what I am, I won't be angry." Unable to hold back her laughter, Yoon Chug-seo stretched out her hand and pinched her cheek. "Fool. Even if you are a licking dog, you are the most beautiful and cutest licking dog." "You still said that." Soo Jin-ran became anxious as he stamped his feet. Okay, let's stop talking. Can you let go of your hand first?" She looked down at the hand holding her wrist. "If you don't let go, what will you do if you run away?" Yoon Chug-seo smiled and bent over. "This is my home, where should I run? I want to go upstairs to change my clothes. You soiled my clothes, and you didn't give me one, and you didn't allow me to change into something more comfortable," ordered it. Only then did Soo Jin-ran understand what she meant and quickly let go of her hand. She let go, but Yoon Chug-seo was not in a hurry to go upstairs. "Why don't you come up with me? Your clothes are also stained, so just change them into mine first." He lowered his head and glanced at the stain on his chest. There was indeed a mark on it, so he didn't refuse and followed Yoon Chug-seo upstairs to her room. Yoon Chug-seo changed her clothes and picked another one for her. After she put it on, She lifted her hair from behind and straightened her to face the mirror. Look, how beautiful this face is. Su Genran looked at herself in the mirror, with bright eyes and white teeth. Her eyes were a little swollen from crying, but this did not diminish her beauty at all. On the contrary, she looked pitiful. No matter how you looked at her from the front or side, she looked good looking, but why did Xiao, he doesn't like it? Thinking of him, my eyes turned red, and I couldn't help but want to cry. Look at you holding her chin with one hand. Yun Chugzio bent down. You are so beautiful, why can't you think about it so hard? Yes, I'm so good looking, why doesn't he like it? What kind of thing does he like? Su Genran muttered to himself, as if he was stunned. Wrong, the force on his fingers became stronger, pinching her chin a little painfully. Su Genran frowned, raised his head and looked at her, but Yun Chugzio looked at her in the mirror and said, Genran, do you know where did you go wrong? Su Genran shook his head numbly. Your fault is that you are too centered on him. You put yourself too low, so low that he can't even see you. So low, he can't even see me. Su Genran blinked in the mirror and saw confusion in his own eyes. She didn't understand what it meant. Yes. Don't you know that men are eager to challenge? You come to your door every day, bring tea and water, and ask for help. What are you doing? Does his family need a nanny? Or does he need a maid? Every word Yun Chugzio said was like a sharp needle pricking her heart. Su Genran frowned, but, I want him to see how good I am. If you want him to see how good you are, you shouldn't do this. You have to control happiness by yourself. He took her hand and squeezed it hard. End of this chapter. Shao's sweet wife, she is doted on. Author, Jin Yet. Chapter 250. Chapter 250. Are there any men who don't eat out? She seemed to understand what Yun Chugzio said, but she didn't seem to understand it well. Then what should I do? Su Genran began to feel that there was a little strength in her heart, as if something was slowly filling her heart, and she was no longer as confused as before. Yuran, you are so beautiful, you are shining, you should let him notice you. Yun Chugzio bent down even more and said almost against her cheek. Before her eyes could light up, suddenly another twist, but dash. But what? She said but Su Genran's heart trembled. But it's too late for you to do this now. What you did before was so humble that he no longer cares about you. No matter what you do now, he will not change his inherent impression. Besides, you still have someone in front of you now. An unknown rival, you are short of time and it is not suitable for you to do this. Letting go of her hands, Yun Chugzio straightened up, sat in front of the dressing table, and slowly applied hand cream. She has always been very meticulous in her skincare, taking her time to get every part in place, so Yun Chugzio's skin is particularly good. She is not a very beautiful person, especially in contrast to Su Genran, she looks even more ordinary. But her skin is fair and delicate, and she can even pinch it with water. In this regard, Su Genran is not as good as her. Seeing that she stopped talking and just lowered her head to apply hand cream seriously, Su Genran became anxious. What should I do? Didn't you say it's not an important matter? They can get divorced even if they get married, not to mention that they are just engaged now. Then you said it was too late, what do you mean? Turning to look at her, Yun Chugzio sighed helplessly. There is a way, but I'm afraid you don't dare. I don't dare? What don't I dare to do? Su Genran felt at this moment that as long as she could be with Xiao, there was nothing she dared not do even if she went to poke a hole in the sky. Really? Yun Chugzio raised her eyebrows, turned around and sat facing her, and said with a smile, why are you confused? Who is this Xiao? What a big deal it is for him to get married. Can he just say it alone? With so many elders and relatives in the Si family, do they all agree? Much easier. Su Genran was listening attentively at first, but when he heard what happened later, he shook his head in disappointment. No, Chugzyo, you don't know him at all, nor the Si family. Yoon Chugzyo looked questioning. If this matter were placed in your family or in other big families, then it might be like this. But Si Yao is not the one. Su Genran raised his eyes and looked into the distance, and his thoughts drifted away. The Si family is like this now. The head of the family is Si Yao. I know a little bit about how difficult it is for him to sit in this position. He has many elders, but he is definitely not a person who will listen to the manipulation of his elders. In other words, no one in the Si family. No one's opinion can influence his decision. It is precisely because of this that in the Si family, he sticks to his word, and no one dares to challenge his intentions. So Si Yao decided to get engaged, that is, to make an appointment. No one can change the result by saying no. Su Genran still looked fascinated when she mentioned Si Yao, while Yoon Chugzyo found it incredible when she heard her description. She had met Si Yao twice. The man was extremely handsome, but too cold and difficult to approach. She had said hello to him twice, but it was obvious that he never remembered her. The Yoon family is also a wealthy family. She grew up in such an environment. She is very aware of the intrigues involved, and she also knows how difficult it is to survive in the cracks. For example, in the Yoon family, the eldest uncle Yoon Bokyan is the real head of the Yoon family, and his father Yoon Jongcheng also has shares in the company and has many properties under his name, but in the end, he still has to listen to his uncle. And she herself is a girl, so no matter how capable she is, in the Yoon family, the one who is valued is always the unimproved son of her uncle. Everyone must weigh the pros and cons and be subject to checks and balances in everything they do. Even her eldest uncle Yoon Bokyan is no exception. As a head of the family, you must listen to other people's opinions and you must not do whatever you want. She believes that all aristocratic families are like this, but I didn't expect that there are exceptions. From Su Genran's words, it can be heard that as long as Si Yao wants to do something, no one can stop him, and no one dares to give advice. Isn't this just doing whatever he wants? Isn't this what she is pursuing and yearning for? Does it really happen that such people still exist in this world? Chu Shui, Chu Shui. After calling her several times, Su Genran turned around and found her in a daze. He pulled her several times before she responded, "What are you thinking about?" "No, it's nothing." Shaking her head, Yoon Chugzyo asked again, "Then you mean, if you want to be with him, you must be willing to do it?" "Of course, otherwise why would I bother so much?" Su Genran said depressedly, pouting and playing with his fingers. "Sigh, I knew that Chugzyo couldn't come up with any ideas. At best, he could only comfort her. Then tell me, what have you gained after putting so much effort into it?" "Yes, he has given me a lot of things, including bags, clothes, and jewelry, but they were only given to me during holidays or my birthday. But in fact, the things he gave are quite expensive, but I don't really like the style." "But..." Before she could finish speaking, Yoon Chugzyo interrupted her, "Who asked you this? Do you care about those things?" "That? I'm asking you, how many times have you kissed him? Have you ever hugged him? Have you ever, that," she whispered, covering half of her face with her hands. Opening her eyes wide, Su Genran's face quickly turned red at a speed visible to the naked eye. She punched Yoon Chugzyo twice hard. "Oh, what are you talking about? How can you say such a thing?" In her eyes, Yoon Chugzyo was a lady who always spoke softly, and never made excessive jokes. But she didn't expect that such words would come out of her mouth. "I'm helping you with ideas now, and you still blame me?" Yoon Chugzyo shook her head. "You shouldn't have, never even held someone's hand." He could have guessed it by looking at her innocent reaction, but Yoon Chugzyo was also surprised. Normally, they were not considered childhood sweethearts. After all these years, he had never touched such a beautiful Su Jinran, who took the initiative to embrace her. These days, are there any men who don't eat out? Then, that hand must have been held by him. She blushed and was embarrassed to say that it was when she crossed the road many years ago that she took the initiative to reach out and hold his hand from behind. Maybe he didn't pay attention while crossing the road, or maybe he was afraid of the danger of throwing her away, but he didn't let go until she crossed the road. But even so, she was happy for several days. End of this chapter.